Quorum. I must inform that the clerk of the committee can motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot entertain points of order, nor participate in debate. We can now proceed to the election of the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 106.2, the chair must be a member of the government party. Je suis prêt à recevoir des motions pour la présidence.
Mr. Clerk, I'd like to move and nominate Mr. Randeep Sarai, the MP for Surrey Centre, as the chair of Justice Committee. Thank you.
Y a-t-il d'autres motions?
Are there any other nominations?
Mr. Sarai be elected as chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? It has been moved that Mr. Sarai be elected as chair of the committee. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
Yes.
I declare the motion carried and Mr.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for electing me chair, and I hope to have good lunches and treat you guys all well. But we'll have to wait for that for probably the next committee in the new year.
Attendre au prochain comité, à la prochaine séance du comité. Donc, si vous êtes d'accord, j'aimerais inviter le greffier pour s'occuper de l'élection du premier vice-président, conformément à l'article, le premier vice-président doit être élu un député de l'opposition officielle. I'm now prepared to receive motions for the position of first vice chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'd like to move for the nomination of my colleague, the Honourable Rob Moore, as the vice chair.
It has been moved that Mr. Moore be elected as the first vice chair of the committee. Y a-t-il d'autres motions?
Are there any other motions?
Saying none? No?
Okay.
Oui.
We
Carried?
Yes. Elizabeth Briere, who is on the screen.
Je propose mon collègue.
I would propose my colleague from the Bloc Québécois, Réal Fortin. So this has to be a member of the official opposition for the position of vice chair. If I may, I just want to clarify the situation for my colleague, Ms. Briere.
We're still going for the first chair,
Yep.
right? So I don't know if you want to retract that yet, and then we'll proceed with the first chair, vice chair, which is for the opposition party.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So it has been moved by Mr. Brock that Mr. Moore be elected as first vice chair of the committee. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
Yes.
I declare the motion carried and Mr. Moore duly elected. Conformément à l'article 106.2.
Pursuant to Standing Order 106.2, the second vice chair must be a member of an opposition party other than the official opposition.
For the second vice chair.
Alors, je peux y aller maintenant.
So now can I go? I would like to propose my colleague from the Bloc, Réal Fortin. It has been moved by Ms. Briere that Mr. Fortin be elected as second vice chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion? I declare the motion carried, and Mr. Fortin is duly elected second vice chair of the committee.
One of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether participating virtually or in person. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of recommendations from public health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, the following is recommended for all those attending attending the meetings in person. Anyone with symptoms should participate by Zoom and not attend the meeting in person. Everyone must maintain 2-meter physical distancing, whether seated or standing. Everyone must wear a non-medical mask when circulating the room. It is recommended in the strongest possible terms that members wear their masks at all times, including when seated. Non-medical masks, which provide better clarity over cloth masks, are available in the room. Everyone present must maintain proper hand hygiene by using hand sanitizer at the room entrance. Committee rooms are cleaned before and after each meeting. To maintain this, everyone is encouraged to clean surfaces such as the desk, chair, and microphone with the provided disinfectant wipes when vacating or taking a seat. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank members in advance for their cooperation. I guess other business? I would like to now suggest that as the next order of business, that the committee now proceed to considering considering our routine motions. Madam Diab.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Je vais les lire. Que le comité retienne au besoin et à la discrétion de la présidence les services d'un ou de plusieurs analystes de la Bibliothèque du Parlement pour l'aider dans ses travaux.
And so we will vote after one by one for each one. So
unless it's the will at some point that we vote on them all. But yes, so that's the first motion.
Sure.
On the analyst.
Do I have the will of the committee? Yes. Oui. Okay. Go on.
Okay. Thank you.
Carried, right? Would I say carried? Yeah, it's carried.
I would now be pleased to move that the subcommittee on agenda and procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, the chair, and 1 member from each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
Do I see consensus? Yes.
And I
carried.
so move, yes. Next motion would be that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have that evidence published when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition parties and 2 members of the governing party, but when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
So carried?
Yes? Okay. La prochaine...
The next motion, that witnesses be given 5 minutes for their opening statement, that whenever possible, witnesses provide the committee with their opening statement 72 hours in advance, that at the discretion of the chair, during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows. For the first round, Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, New Democratic Party. For the second and subsequent rounds, the order and time for questioning be as follows. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes. Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes. New Democratic Party, 2.5 minutes. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes. That is the fourth motion.
Do I hear consensus? Yes?
Oui.
Agreed? Thank you.
Okay,
Carried.
la prochaine, that only
The next one.
be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee, provided the documents are in both official languages, and that the witnesses be advised accordingly.
Do we see consensus? Yes?
Okay?
Carried.
Que la
That the clerk of the committee, at the discretion of the chair, be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittee. Adopté.
que les témoins qui ont
That if requested, reasonable travel, accommodation, and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses not exceeding 2 representatives per organization. And that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair.
Everyone's
Oui.
okay with that?
access to in-camera meeting. Each committee member be allowed to be accompanied by one staff member at an in-camera meeting, and that one additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present.
Everybody okay? Yes?
Okay? That one copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff, and that the analysts assigned to the committee also have access to the in-camera transcripts.
Good. Carried.
Okay. Alors, la prochaine,
The next one. That a 48-hour notice interpreted as 2 nights be required for any substantive motion to be moved in committee unless the substantive motion relates directly to business then under consideration, provided that A, the notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday, and B, the motion be distributed to members and the offices of the whips of each recognized party in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted, if it was received no later than the deadline hour. C. Notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day, and that when the committee is holding meetings outside the parliamentary precinct, no substantive motion may be moved.
All in agreement? Yes?
next motion, that in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, A, the clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not a member of a caucus represented on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of the committee in both official languages any amendments to the bill, which is the subject of the said order, which they would suggest that the committee consider. B, suggested amendments filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendments relate shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that the committee may, by motion, vary this deadline in respect of a given bill. And C, during the clause-by-clause consideration of a bill, the chair shall allow a member who filed suggested amendments pursuant to paragraph A an opportunity to make brief representations in support of them.
We in agreement?
that the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House Administration Support Team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and the equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advise the committee at the start of each meeting of any witness who did not perform the required technical tests.
We all good?
And the last one that I have here, que tous les documents présentés
That all documents submitted for committee business that do not come from a federal department, members' offices, or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau be sent for prior linguistic review by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to members.
We all good?
OK. C'est tous les motions.
Those are all the motions.
Do we want to? Any other routine motions? No? Okay. Is there anything else that we want to discuss, or I guess we can adjourn until the new year? By everybody on screen, I don't want to miss Mr. Garrison or Ms. Briard. All good? Well, I guess I move to adjourn, and we'll see you in the new year. I guess we can have chats in between if there's anything we want to discuss, but otherwise we can formally adjourn. Thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to serve you. Thank you.